Excited about this episode of the On Friar Podcast, brought to you by NBC7, coming to you on the first off day for the Padres since they got into Cactus League action. So much to discuss and a great individual to discuss it with. So glad to have Jon Morosi back on the pod. Excited to pick his brain about the Padres, and he will actually have the pleasure of being in Seoul, South Korea to start the season. So excited to get his perspective on that opportunity. Derek will be joining us as well, of course. Before we get started, thanks to OG's, the sponsor of the On Friar Podcast. Be on the lookout for new menu items at OG's, who's always updating their menu. Make sure to take advantage of their award-winning beers as well as their loyalty program. It's super easy. You can do it online. You can earn loyalty points, rewards, and exclusive offers, all of which leads to fun and free food. And ordering online from OG's is now easier than ever. You can get OG's delivered straight to your door. Without further ado, the welcome music. It is the On Friar Podcast, and we are fast approaching the season. In 1 week from now, I believe. Now, the time change can be a little bit tricky, but I believe the Padres will be in Seoul, South Korea next Thursday, leaving after next Wednesday's Cactus League game, and a gentleman that will be there with them shortly after they arrive within a few days. Jon Morosi does a fantastic job for MLB Network, NHL Network as well. Find someone who can do both, an expert in two sports like that. Very, very admirable. It's tough to do, Jon Morosi, but you stay on top of it all, and so happy that you could be with us again. How are you?
Darnay, thank you so much for the invitation to be on the show again. Really enjoyed our previous conversations too. So to be able to be on the show with you today is special, especially when considering, as you point out, the historic Seoul Series, the first ever games for MLB in South Korea, Dodgers, Padres. As Daniel Kim, my friend and a Korean baseball analyst, told me, it is the dream matchup for South Korean baseball fans for so many reasons, and we can't wait to be there.
Yeah, much to discuss, and excited to pick your brain about that. Help us out with the time change. You've got a family, you've got responsibilities. I'm sure you're going to be coordinating with the folks back here as the games are going on, hit times, interviews, when you're setting stuff back, when you're live, this and that. What does it look like from a time change standpoint as we try and wrap our heads? Obviously, we know the games are at 3 a.m., so it gives us some idea, but what are we working with as we try and kind of figure out, okay, this is going here and when they're arriving and all that sort of thing?
It's a great question because, as you know, from the production standpoint and how we do our storytelling, when it's an around the clock scenario, it really does it does challenge our routines and rhythms. The good thing is, and this is a general rule of thumb, it's not exactly the case, but it's a general rule of thumb that when you are in Asia, the eastern part of Asia, in this case, I've been to Japan before and done baseball there, but it's generally speaking the exact opposite of Eastern time at any time of day. So what that means is that when you've got the evening baseball games in Korea, it means they're starting early morning in New York, for example. And so ironically enough, we are going to have special MLB tonights in the morning. I suppose you could call it MLB morning or MLB this morning if you wanted to, because we're going to have MLB tonight on live after the game, the post-game MLB tonight in the morning. And that'll be pretty cool. I think so. The general idea, again, using just general rules of thumb here, if the game starts at 6 a.m. Eastern, it'll wrap up around 9 maybe. And so then that means that our live post-game show will go on the air as everybody in the Eastern time zone in the U.S. is having breakfast. And you can get a little breakfast recap of the Dodgers and Padres with us. So it's going to be a lot of fun. It'll challenge our timing. I'll have my watch on and still keep it set to Eastern time, which is helpful for me.
Yeah, there you go.
It'll be good. I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, for the deadlines and for family things and all that, it's nice to not have to do the math in your brain all the time. You can just kind of look at your watch and know, okay, this is what we got to do. This is when I need to call home or FaceTime with the kids or what have you. So that makes it helpful. Um, can you give us a sense the significance of this occasion? We've had some opportunities to kind of like get a feel for that. Obviously, with Ha-seong Kim, Padres have produced a lot kind of in the lead up, given some idea of like his background and why this is so important and why the community of South Korea, Seoul, and the surrounding areas, why this is so important for them. What have you learned from that standpoint as you've kind of gotten closer to making this trip yourself?
If you look at Kim and his story in general, he is a point of great pride for South Korean baseball fans because he did not merely meet the expectations that Korean fans had for him when he made the jump to MLB. He has exceeded them.
Hmm.
And I think that really is a powerful story for Korean fans to think about the possibilities of where KBO players could rank when they make the jump to MLB and what that then reflects back about the caliber of play in Korea. So I think that's really important, especially on the defensive side. He was regarded in some ways as likely to be an average, maybe a tick above average in MLB, and now all of a sudden he's a Gold Glove winner, and he's playing shortstop with Xander playing second base now, which just I think tells you the respect that he has earned in a very short amount of time in North America. So I think that is a number one big time point of pride. Also, this is the ballpark where he played, and so you've got that added element where this is a very special site and circumstance for Ha-seong Kim to be able to celebrate it. Of course, we know the Padres have added Woo-Suk-Go as well to the bullpen, so you now have two Korean players going up against a Dodger team that in the past, as Daniel Kim shared with me, the Dodgers for the older generation, let's say Gen X, maybe the parents, the older millennials, if you will, who maybe have young kids that are now watching the game here, that the Dodgers are the favorite team of many Korean fans who are 35 and older, because you had Chan-ho Park, you had Hyunjin Ryu, but the younger generation, maybe those that are 20 and younger, if you will, they now look at Ha-seong Kim and Woo-Suk-Go and say, wow, the Padres are the team that are really investing in growing the game in South Korea and bringing over top Korean talent. So I think for that reason, you have a bit of a generational gap. And then you've got Shohei Ohtani, who in a lot of ways, as Daniel shared with me, is the most popular Japanese baseball player among Korean fans. So you have all that is Ohtani, the superstar, as part of that conversation too. So just a really special convergence of a number of storylines.
Yeah, and you Darvish as well. And there's a good chance that we get to see him on the mound. Maybe an opening day matchup. We'll kind of get the details of that. I think Padres fans Padres fans travel. They travel to Mexico City. I think there was some excitement to travel to Seoul, and maybe it was maybe the communication when this kind of came out wasn't done as well as it needed to be, because I think fans thought, oh, this is our opportunity to see them in Seoul. But I think the point of this is to bring the game to a fan base that doesn't get to see it in person, which makes complete sense, and give them an opportunity to see these stars that you just mentioned in person, because that never happens, rather than everybody from San Diego and LA making the trip and filling the stadium. This is the stadium that Ha-seong Kim finished his pro career in. The significance for that fan base and that population. Obviously, you mentioned it kind of, in terms of star players, but the exposure that this will bring to obviously a nation that is hungry for baseball and loves the sport. We saw it during the pandemic. We were all watching KBO games. How cool is it from that standpoint to reward their passion in that manner?
You're exactly right. And the commissioners talked about how important Korea is as a market for MLB. And certainly you go back to when Chan-ho Park came over to play in Major League Baseball and what a revelation he was. It's remarkable that the market of Korean baseball fans has grown over a period of time. I think the intent has been there for MLB to do more in Korea within the last decade. I think that the pandemic sort of derailed some of those plans. I would expect that had the pandemic not happened, we would have been talking about a Seoul Series probably several years ago. It was that high of a priority. I think now logistically there's a really big, I think, sigh of relief from the commissioner's office and everybody that's been involved in planning that we finally now get a chance to do this. And I think there was a similar appreciation around the Mexico City series last year as well, that we finally had a chance to do it because baseball had been talking about wanting to do it for so long. So the willingness has been there. And I think, to your point, this is truly a moment for MLB to bring over two marquee franchises in a huge matchup with superstars on both sides to say, this is how much we respect you as Korean baseball fans and as a great baseball country, a country that has hosted games of the World Baseball Classic, a country that won the Olympics back in 2008. So there's a lot of gravitas that Korea has in the baseball world. And I think that this is a very strong demonstration by baseball, by MLB, to really convey to the Korean fans how important they are to the league and to growing the game around the world. And I just think it's the perfect convergence of storylines and matchups to really show, I think, from MLB to the Korean people how important they are.
But will the Korean fans boo Fernando Tatis Jr. because of what his dad did to Chan-Ho Park?
It's a great question, Derek. I have not given that a ton of thought at this moment in time. I'll have to get back to you on that. I really do. I need to think about that, the answer to that question, and to go back. I mean, I do believe there is a lot of institutional knowledge and tradition among Korean baseball fans, so they may well know that story. But I'm not so sure. I do think it's going to be more of an appreciative vibe and supportive vibe. But the good thing is, Derek, I'll be there to be able to report back to you what the reaction is.
I appreciate that. It's really fun, JP, for you to say two marquee franchises, and you're referring to the Padres as one of them, because I've been here for 20 years. For so long, the Padres were not considered that. They wouldn't even be dreamt of being considered that. With what Peter Seidler, the late great Peter Seidler, did to put this franchise back on the map, for them to be in this position and be talked about as a marquee franchise. From your perspective, what exactly does that do for the future of baseball in San Diego, the legacy of the Seidler Foundation and what they were able to do, and just baseball in general, to show so many quote unquote small market teams that you can in fact become one of the big heavy hitters in the baseball landscape?
You're right, Derek. I do think in so many ways this is a moment to appreciate Peter Seidler's legacy, both in San Diego and the larger world. I think he always represented, in so many ways, the good. He really saw the good in people and wanted to elevate communities and bring people together, and just such a giving person. And I think as a result, when you think about this series, you're exactly right. This would not have happened. The Padres would not be the team that's going there without Peter Seidler's commitment to bringing in stars, making the Padres a marquee franchise, investing in Ha-seong Kim, having a truly global perspective that allowed the Padres to be a destination for Kim, for Manny Machado, for Woo-Suk Go to come over as a free agent this offseason. It really is a moment, I think, to appreciate Peter's legacy. And I'm sure that there will be moments throughout the course of that weekend and that week that we reflect on Peter and remember and celebrate him, because his spirit will be very much there with all of us, I think. And I as a quick aside, I think back when the winter meetings were in San Diego, Peter invited me over just to talk in his office. That was right the day after they missed out on Judge. He just, come on over and we'll have a chat. That's Peter. Like, just come on over and we'll talk. And he invited me into his office. We had a wonderful conversation that day, and that's him. So I want to make sure that I reflect that same welcoming approach and open-mindedness and gratitude when I'm there covering his team, because it's always going to be his team. So that's how I feel as I get ready to make that trip.
I seem to recall you being on that Bogarts news. Did Peter tip you off? Did he give you some idea?
I didn't have the final scoop. I can say that, but I do know this, that when I was talking to Peter that day, it wasn't, and this is again classic Peter. There's a lot of owners or GMs that when he was one of the finalists to get Judge, talking to me would have been the last thing he wanted to do, right? I mean, he would not have wanted at all to talk about something that didn't go his way, but it was always Peter's attitude and approach to life that, well, this thing that I really tried hard for didn't work out, but there was that quiet confidence. I in the back of my mind, I said, he's working on something here. Like he is not just chalking up the rest of the week to, oh, it didn't work out for Judge, so we're just gonna, we'll catch up after the holidays. Nah, you could tell the gears were turning. So I didn't have the exact specific terms nailed down. It was not my scoop. I want to be clear about that, but I walked out of that office thinking something's up here. He has got some big plans, and sure enough, it was about 24 hours later the Bogaerts news arrived.
JP, finish this sentence for me. The Padres will win the 2024 World Series if.
Okay, so the Padres, they do have some work to do, but I really believe that they can win the World Series if the early returns on Brito and Vasquez continue. Because that, to me, has been one of the most important parts of spring training. I know people want to focus on, well, who's going to fill out the outfield. Merrill and Morosi could surprise. And by the way, you've got superstars. And so you're supposed to be able to handle a little bit of a question at one position if you've got the guys that you've signed extensions to, and I'll include Cronenworth in that conversation. You've got Bogaerts, you've got Machado, you've got Tatis. You should be able to score enough runs. You should. Last year's team was, I think, an aberration where the numbers all said they should have been a good team, and they just weren't. And I think that now that as much as it stings that you trade Soto, if you get back 40 to 60% of your rotation, that's a fine trade. It's hard to trade a future Hall of Famer and feel like you won the deal. I'm not saying that the Padres did win the deal, but I will say this. They did well with the return. I'm not saying they won the return because Soto was probably going to hit 45 homers this year for the Yankees, but they did well. Understanding that they probably had to make this trade, once they got into the headspace where they said, hey, I've got to make this trade. Okay, they made the trade. They did well. I'm a big fan of Michael King. I like where the Padres are at now with the depth they've built in that rotation.
I thought you were going to say if Ha-seong Cole opens up and swallows Dodger Stadium with the team.
Hey, you got to be an optimist.
Yes.
And listen, there are many fan bases that I speak with this time of year where they'll say, hey, John, what's the deal? I'm not going to go on the air with our friends at NBC Sports in Chicago and say, well, the White Sox are going to win it all. I can't say that. But I charted a path for you. Conceivably, it could happen if, and because implicit in my response is that Machado, Bogaerts, Kim, Cronenworth, Tatis, they all have to be healthy. Like, those are givens. That like if those things aren't true, then the rest of the conversation just doesn't even happen. But if those things are true, and if you want to dream a bit, as one of my dear college roommates, David, is a devoted Padre fan. Like when I talk to him, I might talk to him tonight. Actually, I'll let him know. Hey, I said to our friends and the On Friar Podcast that the Padres got a chance, and he's going to be very happy when I tell him that.
Yeah. The stars have to be the stars. I think that's the starting point for any conversation beyond that.
And I think, like, I'm sure Dave, like all of us, is wondering, like, is this roster complete? But we've also been wondering that for like 2 or 3 months now. And there have been guys added on like minor league type contracts. There's been the Jerks and Profars and Tim LeCastros and that sort of thing. But still hard to believe that those would necessarily be the answers. Are they going to, include 2 of the young guys? Like Jackson Merrill seems like a pretty sure thing at this point, but is it going to be Merrill and Morosi or Merrill and Paulie? There's got to be something else going on. We know AJ Preller is as aggressive as they come. There's obviously the question of like, how much money do they have to spend? They're clearly trying to get under the CBT or stay under the CBT. Do you have any inkling of like whether it's a free agent like Tommy Pham or could there possibly be a trade in the works? We've seen Preller make deals to fill holes like Sean Manaea and Taylor Rogers. They were both within a week of opening day in 2022. It's just hard to believe that there won't be a significant ad either between the Seoul Series or before Petco Park opening day a week later.
It's a great point. I do think that AJ will keep looking. I believe that the financial restraints are real. If they weren't real, I would have thought that a low base, whether it's $5-6 million, a little more than that, a deal for someone like a Michael A. Taylor, Adam Duvall, Tommy Pham, that kind of a contract would have happened by now.
I mean, Eddie Rosario just got like $2 million minor league deal. Like they could have done that, right?
Right. And like that. So that's what's telling me that they are literally tapped out. Now, if you, and this would be very much from the AJ Preller school. If you look at some of the guys they've got in camp, would they turn around and flip one of the guys they just brought in if they feel like they have enough pitching, which is always a dubious thought to have, but some people have it. If they feel like they've got enough, then do you flip one of those guys for a comparably priced, close to the league minimum outfielder and look for a team that's got a surplus of outfield? Maybe. But I think that last year, we got to remember here, they're still trying to replace a reigning Cy Young winner here. So it's not as though, yes, I think they made a good trade, but let's not forget the quality of the guy that's walked out the door in Snell. I think Musgrove's going to be better. This is a team that I think will internally improve, but I would be very reluctant to trade from that starting pitching depth very quickly. And so they may have to just kind of go with what they've got in-house. They did bring Profar back. I think that was important. When you think about Profar and Tatis, again, like they've got some guys. You should be able to piece together one spot of the outfield. I would love to see Michael A. Taylor, though. I mean, he's the guy because of his ability to defend. I would really love to see him, and I would love to see, to your point earlier, even someone like a Duvall or the maybe the right-handed equivalent of what Rosario gives you. There's clearly a need, and there's got to be a price at which it's almost too low for them to pass up. But clearly, they haven't found it yet. And I think that for all those reasons, for AJ's propensity to make deals late in spring training, I am certainly keeping the 619 area code on my mind to make a move there.
Speaking of the reigning Cy Young winner, what is taking so long, and why is it the only guys who are big names left who are unsigned are all Scott Boras clients? And when will it reach the tipping point where he's been successful with this tactic for decades? Teams and players are going to be like, listen, dude, we can't miss 3/4 of spring training and expect to have a competitive season.
Well, Derek, it's fair questions. And I think that with Scott, much more often than not, it does all work out for his guys. It works out quite well. There are certainly rare cases in the past. Mike Moustakas comes to mind where it just doesn't happen. And you're stuck waiting and you end up signing in March and it's not what you expected at all. That has happened, and it may happen now for Snell and for Montgomery and for JD Martinez to an extent as well. Should they have accepted different offers that happened in the first half of the offseason? Evidently, that probably would have been a good strategy, but we'll see. Scott has surprised us before. You're seeing now teams that have injury issues. The Red Sox are among them. The Giants are another team. So the Cardinals I'd mention as well. So there are teams out there that need help, and Scott still has good players. Will there be a backlash? I, again, would be very reluctant to go there because as much as I think it was the year after the Moustakas deal didn't work out, or a couple years after that, then he goes out and he's able to get all that money for Rendon and Strasburg and Cole. It was like $1 billion in contracts in one day.
Right.
So he usually wins. Okay. Like not everybody has a perfect record all the time. Nick Saban has lost some football games in his career. So it happens. And I think that Scott is going through one of those times right now. But I still think you look at the deal that Bellinger signed. He still did pretty well for the AAV at least. And that's probably what Blake will have to deal with. I think the thing with Snell that stands out to me, and I love what he's able to do. I think he certainly can help basically 30 teams right now. But he did lead the league in walks. And when you lead the league in walks and a GM looks at it and says, so you led the league in walks, you're now entering your early 30s, and you're asking me for a deal of whether it's 6 years, 7 years, 8 years, whatever it ends up being. And I'm not saying that he made that request. I'm just saying hypothetically if he did. It makes a GM nervous because they say, well, you led the league in walks last year. I'm not so sure that I want to give you a 6-year deal at $30 million a year. It's just, that's a lot. And I think that's probably where that friction came into play. And we'll have to see. It's such an interesting conversation. I would love if whenever Blake signs, if Scott or Blake gives us the full chapter and verse of everything that led up to it. It'd be a fascinating read and a great conversation. But unfortunately, this is not that day that we find out that information.
Yeah, and when you turn 36 and the fastball ticks down from 97 to 94 and you can't locate it, now you've got problems.
Right. And to your point, if you were walking guys when you won the Cy Young, and then they project to the future and say, wait a minute, what happens when your stuff diminishes? Then how many guys are you going to walk? And it's not a comfortable conversation. Now, if it's a 3-year deal, and it's a shorter term with the high AAV, like what Zach Wheeler got with his extension from the Phillies, that should be available to Snell. That really should be, because the guy just won the Cy Young. There's a big difference between the risk of a 3-year deal and the risk of a 6-year deal. And hopefully somewhere in that middle ground it will be a compromise.
This is what I think about the Snell situation. You can tell me whether or not it's fair. Snell, famously had slow starts to the season. And I want to say on more than one occasion after the trade said, it's difficult. It's difficult to go through this process. I had a comfort level in Tampa. He had a great relationship with Kyle Snyder, I believe, their pitching coach. And it was tough for him to come to new surroundings, figure out himself, figured out his teammates, all of that. And he had a full offseason. Trade was right around New Year's Day to the Padres. It was sometime around the holiday. So it wasn't like it was a midseason trade deadline, anything like that. And it still took him some time to kind of develop that comfort level, probably like more than a full year. To have him in this situation where he might not even get a spring training with a team. And he's coming from Ruben Niebla. It took him probably 3 years, and it was a conversation with Niebla, I think this past season, that said, don't worry about the walks. Walk guys is fine. You'll get the next guy out. Like, that takes some time. Again, it took a few years for him and Niebla to kind of be on the same page and for Niebla to figure that out. I just think Boris, while he's, potentially doing Blake Snell some favors in terms of his bank account, I wonder if he's doing him a disservice and potentially the team that he's signing with a disservice in letting it go this long and then throwing Snell into this situation a week, maybe less before the season, be like, okay, figure it out. They're going to expect a Cy Young winner and they're going to pay you like a Cy Young winner. Hope you can make them happy and hope you can perform at the level that they expect you to, given a strange offseason.
That's a fair point, Darnay. And I think that it is part of those conversations always between the agent and the player. What is best for the financial aspect versus what is best for your happiness, contentment, performance, human existence as a baseball player. And sometimes those things align and sometimes they don't. And to your point, this might be one of those moments where it doesn't. And does a team like the Angels, also in Southern California, of course, they need some starting rotation up? Do they jump in? And would that be a comfortable situation for Blake, given that he'd be able to stay on the West Coast, obviously? It's an interesting set of questions for sure. And I do think that you raise a very good point about the comfort, and especially now with just how finicky we are as an industry with pitching, and how concerned and how quickly concerned teams will get about their pitching when it's not fully lined up and ready to go. And if he arrives to camp on March 15th and ownership says, hey, we signed you, great, so when can you pitch? And he's like, well, I kind of need like a month to ramp up. It's like, wait a minute, we just signed you to this massive deal and you're not ready yet. And so you're exactly right that it is a recipe for someone to feel unfulfilled. And who that person is and how unfulfilled they feel, I suppose we'll have to wait to see how the story plays out. But I do think that you're correct that it's not a favorable situation for the player walking in. And honestly, the same thing happened to Ian Desmond when he signed with the Rangers all those years ago. And all of a sudden he's playing center field. Remember that? So that that was a very unique circumstance too. And I don't know that it was really a great situation for Ian to have a ton of success.
Hey, wherever Snell lands, as long as Larry Rothschild's not there and then Ruben Niebla has to come in and undo all that damage, he should be in pretty decent shape. a lot of young guys going to be vying for roster spots. Darnay, you touched on it. You're talking about potential for 2 or 3 rookies in the outfield. JP, you can't have that many guys and not give them playing time, especially when you got all these. I mean, Paulie and Merrill and Morosi have never played a game above Double-A. In your experience, seeing guys who come up, maybe not too fast, but come up, and they did it with CJ Abrams a couple of years ago, where they brought him up real quick and they put him on the bench, and it seemed to hamper their development. How important is it for, if you bring up a guy who's young, you got to make him an everyday player. You got to get him those reps, because if you're not getting him those reps, it almost stalls the development. Then they have to go back down in the minor leagues and almost rebuild themselves back up again. I think it's a long-winded way of asking, can they keep too many prospects at one time, and then some of them get hurt by this because they are having too much of a youth movement at once and they can't all play at the same time?
I think it's a very fair point, Derek. And I would say one of the key aspects of that is, and this may sound a little rudimentary, but I think it's a fair point, that often you have to look at your ball club and look at who you're probably going to face a lot. And if you are looking at your schedule and saying, okay, we're probably going to have maybe 70% of our starts in the month of April will be against right-handed pitchers, you better feel like the guy that you've got on your team and you're going to keep on your team is either a lefty who is going to play against all righties, or a righty who is so good that he'll be able to play against the tough righties. Because if he can't, you can't have him in the big leagues right now. You really can't. I mean, that's where there is that left-handed advantage, which Morosi, of course, will have. And you think about just that approach. If you're going to start against all the righties, if it's basically a platoon, great. And then have a veteran righty bat. That's, again, where an Adam Duvall would be perfect, or a Michael A. Taylor, or somebody, maybe it's a waiver claim, who would be like a platoon guy elsewhere that maybe is out of options, is not going to make a particular roster. That guy becomes really important. And, Azokar has been on the roster for a while with the Padres, certainly. But I would look for that type of arrangement can work. But again, then you're saying, I'm going to keep a rookie, but I effectively have to dedicate 2 roster spots to this guy, because not only do I have the rookie here, but I've got to have somebody that I can platoon with him to make sure he's not getting overexposed. And so that becomes a pretty big commitment. For the right player and for the right platoon partner, it's all good. But you're exactly right with the Abrams example. If the production slips a little bit, and then all of a sudden the platoon partner is playing really well, what do you do? How do you then manage that? And so, and those adjustments, by the way, the old bromides about how you can handle things in playing time, it's all changed, because before the guy makes his debut, the book is already out on how to pitch to him. That information is all known. It's all out there. And so this notion, you get to the league and then they adjust to you and then you adjust back. That's done by like the first at bat of the guy's career. The adjustments already happened. So good luck, go get them. And so you better be really ready to be able to handle that because it's coming at you fast.
Should we be at peace with Jackson Merrill being on the opening day roster? I think there is some bit of trepidation, especially the folks that cover the farm really closely and watch these guys and value their development and want to see them arrive, but want to see them arrive at the right time and maybe not get forced. There's obviously the position change, limited experience at Double-A. Like how good should we feel about, like, he's shown well during the spring. He looks and sounds comfortable. I think from like a makeup standpoint, he's it, like he's got what you want, but he is young and he does lack some of that minor league experience and seasoning. It's looking like he is projecting to be on the roster, if maybe just for lack of other options. Should there be some trepidation, or should we say, you know what, this is a young, athletic, talented, mature kid, like let's see what he gets, or let's see what he's got?
I think it's the latter. I'm good with it, because you look at the modern game, and while yes, it can be frightening because of how good the pitching is and how quickly they can scout you and figure out how to attack you, I also think that a lot of the young players that are arriving who have developed certainly within the U.S. high school and then college system with all the travel ball involved, they've got a lot of reps. I mean, they get a lot of reps coming up through the system, to where it used to be that, you have to get X number of plate appearances in the minor leagues. I don't know that I buy that anymore, because a couple things have happened. The players at the major league level are so expensive. So it's expensive to sign the superstars. And you cannot have a team of all superstars. The Padres tried to really index that way last year, and it didn't even work out. So I think this is very illustrative of what you're going to have to do. And I think he's shown enough that the Padres feel reasonably sure about the type of player he's going to be. It's interesting, too. I'd be curious as you go along the journey. One thing that the Cardinals, and this was not Mike Shildt's responsibility when he was there, but one thing the Cardinals as a front office, I think, did not do that well was properly evaluate their own players. They had Randy Arozarena and Adolis Garcia. Come on, guys. They were there, and they didn't really know what they had. They didn't give the opportunity to the right players for the right duration of time. And now they're chasing. I mean, that's two all-stars that they had. They just kind of gave them away. They didn't really know what they had with them. So I think that, that's something that I would imagine that Mike has learned from. And again, it wasn't really his fault to begin with. I think it was more of a front office decision. But knowing who you've got, knowing how special they can be, and saying to someone like Merrill or Paulie or Marcy, listen, you're my guy. I don't want you to look over your shoulder after 5 games about, oh my gosh, am I getting sent down? You got to let those guys play. And once you've made the decision, and I'm sure they're still going to be scouting the waiver wire. Again, I mentioned that, but I really think there's going to be some good, talented players out there who are out of options somewhere else who are not going to make a club that could fit your roster. And so you have to sort of have this evaluation. Wait a minute. I like this guy. He's about 70% as good as Merrill right now, but I know that that's about as good as he's always going to be. And I feel like there's a little more consistency in what he can do right now. Merrill's a little more high risk, high reward. The ceiling is higher. How do I balance that out? That's going to be a question with guys that are out of options that honestly I can't really give you off the top of my head, but that is part of the calculus of this team before they get on that plane to go to Seoul, South Korea.
And we hear a lot about it's a short spring training. They're going to have to go at short spring training. Got to go and get their roster set. In the grand scheme of a 162 game schedule, how important, how much should we be putting into these first 2 games? Granted, they are against the Dodgers. They are historic. All eyes are going to be on them, even at 3 a.m. San Diego time when they throw their first pitches for each game. Versus, okay, we then have to come back and play more exhibition games and then start the real thing. Like, do we have to have the deadline of March 20th when they actually are playing these games? Or are we still looking at it as, okay, that's a fun little thing we're doing, but we're still looking to have our roster truly set and how these decisions made on March 28th, 29th, when the Giants come here to start a 4-game set at Petco Park?
So a couple things there. Number one, do not trade Ha-seong Kim at all. There were those rumblings a month ago, and I was hearing like this conversation, would they trade Kim? And I just kept saying, no, first of all, don't trade him. He just won the Gold Glove. He's a really good player. And second of all, like on my other side of my email, I'm seeing like all the promotional materials for the Seoul Series. Do not trade him. You can't trade him. Okay. Just don't.
Not until the 22nd.
Well, I would say like not ever, but definitely not in the month of March in 2024. You cannot do that. Okay. We're going to impose a Ha-seong Kim trade deadline on AJ. Just don't do it, AJ. Can't do it. That's my number one thing you can't do. You can't trade Kim. Number 2, you can't get swept. Just split, okay? Just when you go over there, I'm not going to say that we're going to start printing the World Series tickets if you go 2-0, but just don't get swept. We talk about, you don't want to have a long flight if you get swept. 13 hours or whatever it is. You cannot get swept over there. Don't get swept. So don't trade Kim. Don't get swept. All other outcomes for me are fine. You can deal with some little frictional rosters and waiver claim stuff at the final days before the domestic opener. I get it. That's fine. But that's got to be your team. And again, play your stars. This is a showcase for the sport. I get it. They're regular season games that matter in the standings. Yes. But my point is this. You will play better as a team if you lean into the fun of the experience and the spectacle and the joy that you're going to see in the crowd. Just embrace it. Go for it. This should not be a stressful exercise. get your roster, get your team, go over there, and then just immerse yourself in the awesomeness of what we're all going to experience. And you'll play better as a result. Don't stress out too much. Take your best 26, 28, whatever you can do with that first initial 2-game series. Enjoy that. Have fun with it. And don't stress too much, because there's enough. The remaining 160 when you get back will have enough worry for themselves. Just take that as a 2-game opportunity for joy, and then come back and worry about the other stuff later on.
We have to play that for the fan base, and maybe even for Mike Shildt and the club.
Don't get swept. Just don't get swept.
That sale.
Don't get swept. That's it. Just don't come back 0-2.
Derek, you got one more to go out on. I was going to ask about Shildt, but if there's anything else that you have on your mind before we let Jon go.
Interestingly, I was also going to ask about Mike Shildt, because I think it's probably along the same lines, Darnay, as you were going to say, is he seems like he's straight from central casting. He says all the right things at all times. He just like he understands his guys. And Darnay, tell me if you want to take a different tack on this, but JP, in your dealings with him or in looking at his career, I still don't understand what happened and why the Cardinals let him go, and they haven't been the same since. What kind of a manager is he? What can we expect to see here? And can he finally be the guy who does not clash or quarrel with AJ Preller at some point in the first 18 months of being the Padres skipper?
I'm a big fan of Mike Shildt. I always have been. I've always enjoyed talking baseball with him. He loves the game. And I think when you peel back the layers of his journey, basically, shining shoes in the minor league clubhouse as a kid, and then growing up and basically having every job you could have in the Cardinals organization, he's a lifer, and he has grinded it out for a long time to become a major league manager. And then I think it was really a shock to the system when he lost his job, which I don't think he deserved, if we're being fair about it. I do think there was a bit of a personality conflict there. I think he's much more simpatico with AJ. And remember, he's worked for the organization already, so AJ knows what makes him tick. I think he's a really good manager. He runs a game well. No one's going to out-prepare him. He really, really gets into the preparation, and just he will talk baseball with you all day long. And I think that the players, it's interesting. I covered Jim Leyland for a long time in Detroit, and Jim always had this feistiness to prove himself, because in his own mind, he played professionally, but topped out at AA. Jim always said, I had to really earn the respect of the players, because I batted .220 as a AA catcher, and he felt like he always had to earn it every day. And I think Mike has a similar approach. Like, he's a baseball lifer who loves the game, has put his whole heart and soul into it. And in his own way, it's a healthy form of insecurity where he's never stopped trying to prove himself. And that put Leyland into the Hall of Fame. Obviously, Shildt in a lot of ways is still just beginning his journey as a manager, but that's what I see with Mike. I think in players, he's not walking in with the resume of an Aaron Boone or an Alex Cora playing in the big leagues for as long as both of them did, but he does arrive with that grinder mentality of really respecting the players and respecting what they do. That's one thing that you're always going to, I think, hear a lot from with Mike. Is he has a reflexive and innate respect for those who play the game and play it well. I just think that he looks around and says, wow, I'm able to manage some of the best players in the world, but he also knows how to hold them to account. And they respect that part of him. While there's a gap in what he has done as a player and what they have done as a player, you close that gap by the way that you communicate with them. And good players with a good culture want to be held accountable. Okay. They want accountability. Good players want accountability. And I think that there was enough of a collective, I'll use the word embarrassment about how things went last year, that the professional pride of guys like Machado and Tatis and Bogarts was wounded a bit last year. Jake Cronenworth, he's a hockey player from Michigan, man. These guys have pride. And I think that this year, Mike is going to be able to connect with them in a way that brings that pride out. And I think makes this a better team to watch, a more competitive team, a more compelling team, and a more likable team. So I see a lot of good ahead for the Padres in 2024.
Love
I'd
the
like to
optimism.
clarify that
Love
is
it.
not a shot at Bob Melvin. That is praise for Mike Shildt.
That's right. 100%. I'm a huge fan of Bob Melvin too. I just think that last year the chemistry just didn't work. Player to front office staff to manager, it just didn't come together. And that is not Bob Melvin's fault. I just think it was collectively not the right mix. It's like two people that you like who were roommates for a while and just didn't work out. You still love them both. They just weren't really good roommates. And you had a whole team of that last year. And I think that now it's going to be a better overall vibe.
Yeah. It can't be worse. I don't think it can be worse. Jon, you're the best. Thanks so much for making time with us. Enjoy the trip. Safe travels to Seoul. Excited to see your reporting and your coverage there. So enjoy that and enjoy the season. Thanks so much.
Looking forward to it, guys. I'll hope to be covering a lot of really special games in San Diego this season. And when that happens, I'll see you at the ballpark again.
Looking forward to it. Thank you, Jon.
Thanks, guys. All the best. Thank you.